Good evening, this is What's Going On. I'm John Lee. Our guest this evening is Robb Davis. He's a candidate for the Davis City Council. The race is next June. Robb, I want to thank you for being on our show.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
For sure. So I want to start out by making a political announcement, which is I'm endorsing Dan Wolk for assembly in the race that involves 4 other people. I think it'll be pretty clear in the course of the evening why I made that decision. So with that as sort of my concluding remarks, I'm now done with half of what I have to say. So Robb Davis, you have a unique name and you came to live in Davis.
Yeah.
So first, here's my agenda for this evening. Let's spend the first half of the show talking about how you got to Davis. Mm-hmm. And what you do, what you've been doing since you got here, why you came. Mm-hmm. Then and like, get into that, and then give your campaign speech.
Okay.
And then in the second half of the hour, what I want to do is talk about how the city of Davis has been governed in the last 25 years, and how you think it should be governed, and how that is different. And I think that between you and me, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
I hope so.
So I'm going to try and be quiet during the first half, but during the second half, I may have a few things to say. So what brought you to Davis, and how'd you get here?
Well, I mean, approximately it was to take a position at a local nonprofit organization called Freedom from Hunger that is still here in Davis and is in South Davis, works only internationally. In the interface between microfinance and health. So basically, I think a lot of people know about microfinance as a program to provide small loans to groups of very poor women. It's basically used in countries pretty much everywhere around the world now. Social guarantee system. What Freedom from Hunger did was provide technical support to organizations that were providing that service. And what we did that was novel is we would use it as a platform to engage very poor and oftentimes illiterate women in dialogue discussions around various health themes, everything from child nutrition, maternal nutrition. I did a lot of work on malaria prevention, did a lot of work, it's interesting for a man to be doing it, but did a lot of work on breastfeeding promotion, basic child nutrition. That's what brought me here. My background is in public health. And I've worked for the last 22, 23 years really focused on child health in resource-poor environments. So largely in West Africa, Francophone, French-speaking West Africa, also Haiti, Indian subcontinent, about 30 different countries around the world. I mean, the focus, in the early part of my career was really grassroots community development. When I say grassroots community development, really working closely with communities in pretty precarious and high-risk environments on the desert's edge, engaging communities in discussions about assets within the community, things that were working well, and then discussing challenges that they were facing, largely around food security, and again, nutrition and child health. I was intrigued by the microfinance and health connection, because it seemed it really does tackle 2 of the major challenges that a lot of people around the world face, which is lack of access to resources to improve the lives of their family, and then really lack of information about the basics of improving health. People are not stupid. People are not without understanding, but I think we take for granted, the amount of information we have access to about health and other issues. And most people in the world, at least the world I was working in, I think it's still arguably true today, didn't have that information. So it was very much a dialogue approach. And that platform, dealing with the economic as well as the social familial issues was something that was really interested. And I enjoyed my years of work with Freedom from Hunger. I'd started my career examining how people live in extremely risky environments. And my research was about how people use various means to survive in such environments. Certainly, the translation of that to, what I'm aspiring to do now, I think what I came to realize about 6 years ago is that, I had been spending a lot of time going into communities and dispensing a lot of advice. Hopefully good advice and engaging people in discussions about hopes and dreams that they had for their community. But quite frankly, I really didn't know a lot about my own. And I really wasn't really in a position of applying some of the things that I had learned about how to move forward and make hard decisions about improving the health of community, not just in a physical sense, but in a social sense, social health, economic sense. That these are all in balance. And so, I really made a decision along with my wife and family to really, start focusing on my nearby. Became very convinced that I needed to focus on the local.
I think I met you a year after you made that decision, and I think it was about 2008 that I met you.
Yeah.
I'm putting this, what you just said, in the context of our relationship.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
And at that point, you sought out relationships with people in Davis.
Well, it was, and I still am. I think any of us, I'm reading a book right now by a professor emeritus at the university, Robert Thayer, Life Place. And I think one of the things I'm taking away from the book, and that I've been thinking about for a number of years, is how do you go about learning about your home space? How do you, what are all the factors that go into this complex space and enable us, again, to find those places where we need to work to improve the health of our community. And I want to reiterate, you might think as a public health person, I'm narrowly focused on the physical health.
Narrowly focused? How can you be a health person and be narrowly focused?
Well, yeah, true. I guess, but what I want to add is that it was there's a social element to health, and obviously an economic. And there's not some magical balance. A magical balance doesn't exist, but we need to be moving forward to ask what makes us socially strong. And so some of the work that I've done more recently since I started focusing more on local issues has to do with conflict resolution, alternative ways of dealing with conflict, alternatives to our criminal justice system. The economic development side, we can maybe talk about that later. Certainly, we are in a serious fiscal situation as a city. There's not one thing I've learned in my career in public health, various times throughout my career, a magic bullet would show up. I remember my early career, vitamin A was going to solve all our health problems. Somewhat later, it was zinc. At various times, people thought that
zinc's been amazing.
But the point is, as amazing as those individual things there are no magic bullets. And so when I think about health, there's not one thing that we can do to make us socially more resilient. There's not one thing we can do to bring back into balance our fiscal imbalances. And so I'm interested in understanding that complexity, but also then applying my understanding to chart a way forward so that we can have health at those different levels and different aspects of our community. And I want to think about all of them. A lot of the stuff that I deal with here now in Davis as a result of my learning and being part of this community is, the marginalized people in our community, whether they're homeless or on the edge. There's some addiction issues. There's family challenges. People are isolated. These are complex issues, and I don't know how we can be a healthy community if we don't address, in that case, the marginalized members of our community and find ways to enable them to be fully what they are meant to be as human beings. So that's how I got here. I'd say for the last 4 to 6 years, it's been a really steep learning curve. I thought I knew a lot about community. I thought I knew a lot. I was working in community development, all those years, and I think what I'm learning is that it's really hard to be a faithful member of a community when it's your own. And it's hard to find solutions when you have to deal simultaneously with conflict and disagreement. When you're just a consultant or when you're just coming into a situation for a short term, you miss a lot of that dynamic. But when you're embedded deeply within your own community, you begin to realize that change and advancing forward as a community is a day-to-day work. It's a day-to-day labor, and it really does require a lot of listening. It really does require a lot of learning and a lot of humility to understand the perspectives. And I mean, that's the point I'm at in my life, where I really want to apply some of the things I've learned about that to helping make good, solid decisions for the city.
I think that's what Tip O'Neill meant when he said all politics is local.
Yeah.
I think at that point he was referring to the House of Representatives as a community.
Yeah, yeah.
And he understood that each of the people in there represented a whole bunch of people, but they also were individuals.
They are, and within any community, of course, there are interest groups, there are affinity groups, and they are, you know, if we talk in terms of social capital, that's really when we use terms like this, you know, societal fabric. And affinity groups and groups of people that get together, and there are plenty in Davis. It's a real strength we have. People that get together to solve problems. That's a social strength. I've done some writing about this. I think what we could use more of is people moving across those affinity groups to bridge.
The silos.
Yeah. Well, we see that, and it's normal. If you're really going to apply yourself to solving a problem, it's good to get together with people that share it. But we also, and we do have members of our community who are really good at helping bridge across to bring people together to solve larger problems. And I think really do believe that one role of a city council member is to look for those opportunities of connection, to bring people together, to say, hey, I know that you're working on this issue, and you're working on this issue. How do we come together? I mean, even things like putting together the parking task force, which this city council recently did, and I was part of, was a real interesting study to me in bringing together people who really do represent different groups and coming together to solve a challenging issue for our community. And it was not easy, but the building of relationships, of trust, listening to each other over time, we were able to come up, I think, with some good solutions. And so we need people in those positions who are cognizant of the strength of the social networks, but can also challenge people to move beyond the narrowness of them to work together. And certainly that's what I'm, again, at a social level, that's what I'm really interested in helping to facilitate and make happen. And when you're on city council, I think you have an ability, people know you, and you have a lot of relationships in a lot of different areas. They grow, and you have an ability to to encourage people to come together in that way.
So you see that as a primary function of being on the council?
I don't know if I'd call it primary. I mean, primary function of the council really is to define. I mean, I think it's two things, is to help. I like to use the health. I think it's to help the community birth in an ongoing way its vision for what it wants to be. And that can be embodied in documents like general plans and various programs. We're working on the bike plan right now, the transportation element. These big overarching documents. I think city council can set the pace for helping, define that vision and keep it fresh and keep it in front of people. You really use it as an end statement, as a set of clear ends to which we're walking. City council members can clearly have a role in helping define those ends. And it's not the city council members' individual desires. It's shepherding a process. It's birthing that vision. But then, of course, it has to be put into practice through very, very difficult decisions where there are differences of opinion. And in a city as engaged politically as Davis, and it's a great strength, those disagreements or different visions of how we should move forward to solve any number of problems, whether it's, again, I think right now we're dealing with some really serious economic challenges. We can have differences of vision. And so one of the other things, on a week-to-week basis, what a city council member needs to be able to do is listen deeply, do their homework, really comb through and understand the issues as intimately as they can, relying on staff to put the information before them, doing their homework, prepping, listening to people to understand the nuances of the different positions that are out there. But then I think going beyond what the stated positions are to understand what the needs of the people presenting those positions. What's really the need here? What's really driving it? And then to use that information, it's clear to me, and I've been in leadership roles, it's not a question of then city council somehow finding a magical middle. But city council has to make it, members have to make a decision about taking everything into account. I mean, their own background and philosophy and what's brought them here, their own values, what they're hearing from, from the community, to make the decisions that move the vision forward. And I think that takes a lot of humility. It certainly takes a lot of wisdom. It takes really strong, I was talking to a graduate student this morning. He was saying, what in your education prepared you to go in the direction you're going? He said, I don't seem to be learning certain key skills. And I thought, we often refer to things like listening and creating dialogue and conflict resolution. They're often referred to even as soft skills, and they're not. They're the critical thing that enables us to take big policy and the facts about individual projects, everything from environmental reports to engineering standards. We have to take those facts and bring them together and move the community forward. And that takes more than just knowing the facts. It takes more than just knowing and being able to articulate the policy issues, but understanding how it's going to work with real people in the community, especially when there's disagreement. And so we need council members, and I think I can be one of them, who is committed to making sure that process goes forward, not afraid to make decisions, not afraid to cut at times when there is clear disagreement, and then articulate exactly why I've gone in this direction. And then people can disagree, and people can be upset even, but at least there's transparency in what led me to this decision. There's a clear sense of why I'm deciding this way and why I think it's best for the community. And that's the kind of leader, that's the kind of leader I want to be. And that's the kind of leader I think I can be.
So I was talking to a Davis City staff person today, and they said they thought you were a deep thinker and a straight shooter, and I think that's what you just said.
Well, I think we get to a certain age, and it's like, why dance around the issues anymore? Life's short. And I don't think we do anybody any favors by hiding the things that motivate us, and by trying to, well, first of all, we're not going to please everybody. So I think it's better just to kind of try to put it on the table and say, this is what's leading me in the direction that I'm going. I don't really have a problem doing that.
The interruption I wanted to make before was, my new favorite book is Margaret Mead's autobiography, My Earlier Years. And so it's like the first half of her life, up through her third marriage. And they're all wonderful. She loves all of her husbands. And they all love her. And she just was too busy. Anyway, when she was on her way to the South Pacific to do her first work and become famous right after she graduated from Columbia and invented anthropology with Ruth Benedict and the Ishi guy. I don't
know who you're thinking.
Alfred Kroeber. And they all got their PhD from Boaz. Anyway, Boaz wrote her a letter and said, find out if adolescent girls are aggressive and disrespectful in other cultures or just in ours. And he's German, so he used Strom and Durm, like storm and war. That's adolescence. Anyway, so she gets to Samoa and she goes, there's nothing they could have taught me that prepared me for this. Well, okay, now I'm in reality. Poli-sci 2, comparative politics. The difference between Europe and the United States. In Europe, you run on a platform. If elected, you're expected to implement the platform. In the United States, if you're elected, it's based on the judgment you've demonstrated up to this point in time, and you're going to be confronted with a whole new set of issues that you never could have anticipated. But based on our assessment of your character at this point in time, you're the most qualified person we have to be in the decision-making responsibility. One of the magical things about American governance is representative democracy.
That's right.
What role does the elected official have vis-a-vis the mob? Vis-a-vis the dais versus the podium. I mean, that is the central dialogue that defines a political process, whether it's the UN or Davis City Council. So, you know, I'm only trying to synthesize, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 years of what I've thought about democratic theory. Anything more you want to say about an introduction before we move into your campaign?
Well, I mean, one thing I want to, I've talked a lot about the social stuff and framing the world that way, but I think, you know, if I want to make a clear, I do want to make a clear statement that when I talk about the health of the community, I mean, really quite forward in my mind right now is our economic health. And we may talk about that at another time, but I think it's, you know, we're in a serious situation. And, you know, I want people to understand that I recognize the seriousness of it. The seriousness in this way, that we've got serious general fund imbalances. We're heading towards significant deficits. And there, again, I'm going to go back to what I said. You know, it's kind of easy to say, well, to solve it, we got to constrain costs, you know, expenditures, and we've got to grow revenues or enhance revenues. That's easy. But what I'm learning and what I'm interested in understanding better and helping make a decision about going forward is what are the scenarios, what is the mix of further cuts, which, you know, politicians aren't supposed to talk about that. What are the opportunities for enhancing revenue? What are the opportunities for economic growth that will provide streams of revenue? We can talk about what the options are, but I think that the next city council, and this one has done a really good job of saying we're not going to put off, you know, the reckoning
of down the road.
Yeah, we're not. We're going to deal with unfunded liabilities,
which the previous decade had a problem with.
Well, I mean, yeah, I wasn't engaged there, and I hasten not to criticize people that sit in positions of leadership, because I know how difficult it can be, and I know what the constraining factors can be. All I know is that,
on the other hand, I'm not constrained by it.
That's right. Well, but I can only say what I know now, and what I know now is that we need to address these things. You know, we need to address the fact that our roads are, you know, the backlog of repairs on our roads needs to happen now in the short term. We need to acknowledge that, you know, the things that we don't control, spiraling healthcare costs, but we still that affect us, right? Because we have to pay retiree healthcare costs, and we don't control those costs, but we have to pay them. We don't control what CalPERS asks us to contribute based on stock market and other investments. We don't control completely, you know, they don't control at all what they tell us to pay, but we have to pay it because we've made promises to retirees who worked before for the city. The bottom line in all three of those is, those are things that we, especially the benefits issues, those are things that we don't fully control, but we have to do what we can going forward to make sure that we have a city that's sustainable economically. And I think a significant part of what's going to have to happen over the next, probably my entire term if I'm elected, is to just deal in a steady, ongoing way with those issues. So we can repair our roads, so we can enhance the revenues, and we can bring costs under control. And I just, you know, maybe that's an advertisement I want to give to people, because I do come out of more of the social, you know, a lot of people know me for the work I do with homelessness and with the neighborhood courts and restorative justice. But I want to be clear with people that I'm really committed to not running away from those realities, knowing that they're not going to be easy, knowing it's going to take a real team effort, and knowing that the city council members going forward are going to have to be really united in saying to the city, you know, our community, these are the kind of decisions that are ahead of us. And I'm not going to shirk away from making those decisions at all. And I really would like people to understand that I'm ready to apply myself to helping make those decisions. So I just want to be clear about that, because my background might lead people to think I have certain proclivities and I'm not really concerned about other. I'm putting the issue of our fiscal situation front and center. If you read my platform at my website, you're going to see that there's tension all over the place, because I acknowledge that, but at the same time I say, you know, we've got to do other things. Like, we've got two significant, precious resources right here. One is our farmland. That is not just a local nice thing to have. It's I view this prime farmland here around Davis, stretching north and west and south in all directions. I've worked in food. I've worked in food security. This is an international resource we're sitting upon.
Best in the world.
Best in the world. It's irrigated, and we've got, because of the foresight of people that came before us, we've got an amazing irrigation system that recharges our aquifers as the water runs through the canals at 25%. Great foresight. We got water. We got land. We have an ability to produce food to not only serve the needs of our region, but beyond. We need to think about how we shepherd that resource. And I'm really committed to making sure that we're careful about it. But there's a tension, because some forms of economic growth might require using some peripheral land. Now, my preference is going to be, and what I'm going to work towards, is land that is subprime for farm, and there is some of that in our periphery. But I'm merely saying that, and then our second great resource, which I think, and we maybe don't always think of it as a resource, is the university. And so enhancing partnership, building deeper relationships of trust, and really working hard to transfer, again, some of it's ag-related, some of the technologies that are going to be critical to coming up with varieties of crops that withstand salt, for example, something I know about because of my work in West Africa, that are going to enhance our possibility of farming without using pesticides and reduced amounts of water and nitrogen. Those are the things flowing out of our university. And we need to find a way to not only honor them and say, great research, but to harness them in this place and grow a vital economy that provides really, really good jobs. I mean, good, interesting, fun, the kind that we're meant to do, and grows our economy in a way that both honors our agricultural heritage, draws on that wonderful strength. These are challenges. And if people look at what I'm saying, they're going to say, but there's tensions all over the place there, Rob. How can you have all of that? Exactly. Any complex system, like a city, like a county, like a university, has to deal with the inherent tensions in trying to achieve various ends. And I can't sit here right here today and say, I've got a master plan. I absolutely do not. But what I have is, I have some of the most intelligent people on the planet that live within 10 miles of my house. I have a committed populace. We have a committed populace of people who not only work their jobs, but then volunteer their free time. We have an amazing number of retired people who are going to be active for 20 and 25 years who are saying, use me. We have deep social relationships within our community. And so I'm convinced that with these resources, with these human resources, and with these other resources that I just named, that we have the potential to have a strong city. But we need a city council that's going to really stay firmly focused on the fundamentals of getting us healthy. And to me, that starts with there is an economic focus there, not to leave aside the social and the environmental, which also we need to be careful of. And I'm just acknowledging the tensions that are there, and I want to say them. And if I want to, sell myself and give my political speech, it's that I'm cognizant of the tensions, and but I'm also willing to roll up my sleeves and do the hard work of trying to find solutions with the community.
Well,
and
go ahead.
I just want to say, I'm not. Two things. I don't have a particular group that's steering me in a direction. I have the freedom to really represent the whole community. And I think that's a valuable thing to be able to have. And secondly, I am a localist. I am not, my political career begins and ends in Davis, meaning that I have the freedom to make decisions without looking over my shoulder. I think that's important. Not everybody has to play that role. I want to be clear about that. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm casting aspersions at anyone.
Oh.
But some of us have to. And I'm committed to staying focused in the years that I'm on council. I'm committed to staying focused on the issues of most concern to the city within the context of our county and our region. So I just wanted to say that as well.
Sure. So I'm going to jump back to, so you hadn't just said that last, where you interrupted me interrupting you. So I'm reminded that I've been instructed that agriculture is the magical moment between nutrition, nature and human beings. So that's, if I'm not religious enough, then I apologize for being sacrilegious. But so, in being raised as an Aggie from UC Davis, I've always been proud of the fact that I was an urban rat that could understand farmers. And the wonderful thing about the Native American language that we have, the Putatoi, is that the word for farmer is the person who does 1,000 things. And so I think that there's some crossover from what an elected official
Absolutely.
is expected to.
It's a nice model, actually.
Well, it's you know, I'm trying to give you a higher bar to try and leap over.
Well, no, but you're absolutely right. You know, one of the things that I've been able to do in sort of my applied learning in this space is to go and volunteer at a local organic farm. And I grew up in a farming area back east, Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, rich, unirrigated farmland, some of the richest. But seeing a small farmer here who's applied, he and his family have applied themselves to creating organic, good food, you're absolutely right. It is the amount of information that our farmers keep in their heads and the amount of things that they're juggling constantly.
Defies the second law of thermodynamics.
Well, you know, it's a humbling experience to participate. Anyway, first of all, and those many of our community who grow food and you see it in your yard and you've grown it and you eat it, obviously there's a pride for that. But at any larger scale at all, the number of factors that are being maintained in the minds of our farming community, I mean, it's humbling. And I don't have a romantic view of farming. It's messy, it's dirty, sustainability, you know, and these are words that get bandied about.
The botanists I know have a really hard time with aphids in their garden.
and that's all of the pests, and especially in the face of climate change, which is bringing new challenges.
Right.
And you want to do it organically, or you want to do it with a minimum of pesticide, which we have to move towards, or you want to do it with less water, which we have to move towards, or less nitrogen. You know, these are huge challenges, but I see our farming community really stepping up and saying, I get it. If I want my children's children to be farming this land, I'm ready to make those commitments. Right. And so I honor them for that, and I've learned a tremendous amount. And it's really connected me to the broader region.
They're the environmentalists. I mean,
you
want to have land to pass on to your children, independent of the economic issues. I mean, agriculture has never worked out financially.
It's very difficult.
I mean, the whole point of having colleges was to give the people that had urban aspirations the ability to get into the economy.
Yeah.
And the class system. I mean, I'm not going to go there anymore.
Well, but you're pointing out an important thing too that we face as a challenge in our community. I mean, what you just said, you know, ag is not, you know, a highly it's not a highly economically, you know, speaking. You don't make big money quickly. And I think that's a challenge because our land, if you look at the economic uses of our land in the short term, farming doesn't compete well with alternative uses. It's only if you can remove food as strictly a commodity and start thinking about it as a source of life. And it's only when you think about longer term horizons that you begin to value in a different way that land. Again, it's not a religious thing. It's just a practical thing.
Well, it's a different calculus.
It's a different calculus. Yeah.
It's the way Michael Pollan ended his talk when he was at Mondavi Center, which I transcribed. He said, to me, that's the most practical, pragmatic thing you can do. To look organically is realistic. To not look organic is to stick your head in the ground and expect it to be better tomorrow when it's going to be worse. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole constellation of rethinking what it is to grow food, as you just articulated.
Yeah. But we're in that region, right? I mean, this is
we're at the center of food.
We're at the center of it, and we have a university that has a lot to contribute to our understanding of how to do it, and we've got farmers with lots of experience, and I want to make sure as a city, you know, that we value that and that we find and we situate our place within that broader, life place, that broader bioregion. Again, going back to Thayer, who I'm really appreciating and learning a lot.
And some other people too.
And some other
Peter
people.
Bird comes to
well,
mind.
I mean, and Wendell Berry, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
well, that's East Coast. That's back in Pennsylvania. I talked to him once. So let's transition here. So you threw out this word restorative justice. What does that mean to you, and what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, restorative justice is a philosophy of law, if you will, that starts with the premise that when an offense is committed, it's not committed against a disembodied state, and whereby the state then punishes or seeks to exact a punishment for wrongdoing against the state. Rather, it views crime of all kinds, offenses of all kinds, as basically damaging to community and to relationships, and harms happen to real people. They don't happen to a disembodied state. And so what it seeks to do is it seeks to help offenders to understand the harms that their actions cause and hold them accountable. Hold them accountable in the sense of naming those harms and acknowledging those harms, but holding them accountable also in the sense of making the harms right. So it's embodied in many ways, and it's not something that's been invented in the United States. It's evolved in many cultures around the world, but it's being used here now increasingly, including in Davis. It's evolved, one of the practices that's evolved is victim-offender conferencing, whereby a victim, typically of a low-level type crime, but also I've seen examples of very serious crimes, including murder, including rape, though that's a very difficult one. But it seeks to bring victims together with offenders so that the victim can name the harm to them. And what that does is it humanizes for the offender the reality of what they did. And it also does something for the victim, because victims often have very, very simple questions. Why did you do that? What were you thinking? Do you realize what your actions did to me and to my family and how I still feel vulnerable? So it's a humanization process. And then it leads to an agreement whereby the victim and the offender can agree on what it will take to make the harms right. Now, it might sound like, wow, innovative, and who's done that? Well, we had a guest speaker here in Davis last week, Judge Gottlieb, David Gottlieb from Fresno, who was presiding judge of juvenile system in Fresno, with a nonprofit leader, talking about how that is now the default approach for all nonviolent juvenile crime in Fresno. And he's basically saying, I want to see it exist over the state. The recidivism rates for juveniles that don't go through the program is about 35%. Those that do is about 15%. So restorative justice...
A 20% improvement.
Yeah. And
just in gross numbers.
That's gross numbers.
Yeah. One time.
In very similar cases. And the point is that in the acknowledgement of the harm, and in the in taking action to correct the harm, there is not just the restoration of the victim, in the sense of a lot of times victims say, I can actually feel safe again.
Right.
I don't fear the unknown of why this happened, and it wasn't about me. It was about alcohol that this guy consumed and got drunk and busted my window and broke into my house, whatever. But it also restores the offender. I mean, we've tried. It certainly
gives them the opportunity.
It gives them the opportunity. Well, we've tried incarceration.
It's the most direct line.
It is. Look, we know what our punitive system has wrought. It's wrought a prison industrial complex that simply cannot house all the people we send. AB 109.
The highest percentage of any country in the world. A Western industrial world.
AB 109 was an acknowledgement that it's...
number 2.
Who is?
Russia.
Maybe.
Per capita.
Per capita. We're at 700, I think, per 100,000.
100,000.
So there is an acknowledgement that system is not working. There's overcharging. There's charging people with crimes that, a lot of drug crimes specifically, war on drugs is a failure. So restorative justice provides an alternative that holds people accountable. So we have the neighborhood courts program that was started by the district attorney. We have some volunteers who have been working closely to make sure it actually is a restorative process. I think the vision is that we would be able to increasingly see restorative processes used within the school system for discipline. Certainly, a couple of groups that I'm working with are interested in juvenile crime.
Interest-based bargaining is an example of that. The school district instituted that about 15 years ago.
I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, but interest-based bargaining is really restorative justice.
Okay. I mean, there's no single way to do it, but I think
Yeah.
one of the hallmarks is the accountability and bringing victims and offenders together,
Right.
even if it's a surrogate victim, so that the offender has the opportunity to hear what this meant.
Absolutely.
So we've been working on this. It sort of took off when the pepper spraying happened. A group of us got together
Right,
and said, you know, we want
right.
to start thinking differently about restoring community, and now actually we're starting to see some of the fruits of that before our eyes. And it's something that I'm really, and others were really excited about.
Well, I want to change the subject only slightly and blow it up. So, the Davis City Council in 1984 had a gang of 3 from 84 to 90. And so during that time, the people that were advocates of limited growth had supported them when they were elected, and they became no-growthers. And in the 1990 election, when Lois and Susie were elected instead of Mike Corbett, that was a transition where it went from limited growth to no growth, became the litmus test within the Davis political electoral process. That was true until the 2010 election. So when Rochelle and Joe were elected, and I was a candidate as well, was the first time since at least 1972 that city council candidates did not get burned at the stake on their issues, on their position on growth. And all of a sudden, the housing market throughout Northern California was stable enough that there was no growth pressure on the city of Davis. Spring Lake is not building. Maybe they've started up a little in the last 6 months. But West Village on campus, which was designed to accommodate that growth pressure, has been pretty much status quo for the last couple of years.
Especially the single-family housing, yeah.
So at this point, the Davis housing market is zero growth. There was a really big discussion last night, and I wanted you to get into that. But I have a different issue, which is from when Julie was elected in '92 until Sue's term ended in 2012, we have basically seen the Davis City Council as an open sandlot where there was fighting going on all the time on the council. Now, the last 2 years that Sue was on the council, as a council member, Joe was the mayor, and he had Cravosa, and he ran on a position of peacefulness on the council, and he takes credit for that. But I want to say that it's due to 2 other things. One is that Don Saylor actively baited Sue Greenwald the whole time she was on the council, and I blame both of them for that. The second thing is that Rochelle is the de facto mayor, and by that I mean she's the one that's behind the scenes that listens to the other members of the council. And that if you actually look at a council meeting, the vote's actually 4-1, with Cravosa voting 1. And the punchline of my tirade, and I'm almost done, is to say that the one thing that we can be sure of is that in July we'll have a new city council and Joe Cravosa won't be on it. And one of the very first things that'll happen is each member of the Davis City Council is going to get a chance to talk about what they want to talk about rather than what Cravosa wants to talk about. And for the last 3.5 years, going to next June, Cravosa is defining the agenda to the exclusion of the rest of the city council.
You want me to respond to that, John?
No, I don't want you to respond to that. I want you to talk about what you want to do on the city council, and specifically about what happened last night.
Okay. Well, let me just.
I didn't say that at the beginning of the show. That's the point.
I just want to say that you mentioned a whole bunch of people there, and I just want to be really clear.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that I think I want to run is, and that I'm seeing the world differently already, is there's this elusive idea of public service, and I want to say, I think the people that put themselves forward and get into that position of trying to help lead the city, I have a default respect for them. I have a default because it's not easy. You mentioned Sue. One thing I'll say about Sue, I look for models. Sue is a model of preparation. If I could be as well prepared as Sue is for meetings, I'd be thankful. Joe, one of the things I'll say about Joe that I've really appreciated is there is a modicum of decency in that chamber that I think he's done a lot to just simply say, this is the way we're going to act here. We're going to respect each other. Now, I'm saying that because I mean, you had your tirade. You don't have to agree with me. The point is, though, I think that when we talk about things like last night, which you're referring to the cannery, or any decision, I mean, those are things that I look at that I think are really key to being an effective city council member. And I think I mentioned them maybe at the outset, but the idea of preparation, the idea of really doing one's homework, not just reading staff reports, but meeting with staff. Not just reading staff reports and meeting with staff, but meeting with community members. Going to commission meetings where I'm the liaison. Really honoring the work of the commissions, learning from what commissions are doing. I mean, the cannery project to me is a really nice example of a variety of the commissions weighing in, doing the work that many of the individuals on them feel very passionately about, and providing direction to the city council. And I think one of the great, again, strengths of the city, and what I would certainly want to model and do as a city council member, is to really draw on those resources as part of my own learning, and to be able to articulate, I've learned this from this process. The city staff has helped me understand this, and not just as a way to say thank you, but as a way to acknowledge that it really does take a team to really put together, especially complex, and most of our decisions are, but complex things like the cannery project. So I saw that on display last night. I think that's something we should hold up and be thankful for as a community.
So talk about that for somebody who doesn't know anything about what you just said.
Okay. Well, I mean, when you're talking about a housing development, the size and scope of cannery.
For how many?
512 units, okay. And then there's a commercial element to it. Obviously, everybody from, like tree commission, because there are mature oak trees on the property, senior commission, because there are real serious senior housing needs in the community, the bike advisory commission, which I'm part of, because we want to make sure that people have really, really good ways to get in and out of that property, because it is hemmed in by the railroad on the west side, and a major arterial to the south, and no other ways in or out. So connectivity. Of course, the Planning Commission, which kind of brings all of that together and puts forward a recommendation. Safety and Parking Advisory Commission. All of these commissions, and I'm not even going to try to name all of them, but all of these commissions play a role in helping hone the project. Whatever I think about the final outcome of it, I mean, I have some things that I would love to see differently, but whatever I think about that, what I can honor and what I can value and what I can continue to be committed to as a council member is using those commission processes. There's a couple reasons why that's important. Number one, commissions are a significant piece of the representative form of government that we have. They are ways for people to speak directly into issues that they care about, issues in their own communities, issues of broader concern to the community. They're noticed, they're public, anyone can come down and talk about them, and I strongly encourage more people to do that. Secondly, the people that sit on those commissions are typically have expertise in the area that they're talking about.
Damn sure.
And they are bringing that. Think about it. I mean, they're volunteers. They're volunteering their time at least once a month, and probably when you come into a complex process like this one, many hours a month, because it wasn't just commission meetings, it was meetings with the applicant staff to talk about specifics, to go over design issues. So we've got this commission structure, volunteers in the community members moving together to try to create a better outcome for the city. And what I like about it is, I started meeting 3 years ago with the representatives of the Cannery Project about connectivity issues. Real serious challenges, because of, again, where it's situated. But over time, to be able to, to speak into what I believe and what I understand the community needs and wants in terms of connectivity, and to be actually part, I might get in trouble for saying it, but to be part of the ongoing negotiation about, no, we need this. No, we need this. I think, we move in our different areas of expertise and interest, but we move towards, I believe, something that will much better serve the needs of the community compared to a situation where people were not involved. So I honor that process. And any council member, though we have a plethora of commissions, and there's always an opportunity to talk about how we can combine or make them function better. I'm always open to that. But the point is we have an engaged citizenry, and it's part of that representative process. And I think that what I saw on display last night was the end result of all of that was something that is not perfect, is something where there's still disagreement, but I would say arguably is better than what we would have gotten without that engagement.
Oh, absolutely.
So, that I think we need to celebrate, even if we don't like all the specifics of that project. And going forward, those commission processes serve the interests of our community very well, and we need to continue them.
So I have just a couple of reactions, so I'll see how far I get before I give up. The Bob Black, who was student body president when I was freshman, and went on to be council member and then mayor and then county supervisor, was one of the first people to go to China. And he and John Hammond went to China. They took American delegations. This is when it was a big deal and it was really hard to do. They found a place in rural China that liked them so much that that place wanted to build a hotel for Western people. Okay, it took them a year to approve the building. It took them a week to build it. Okay, they had this really long discussion about the way they wanted it and who was going to do what.
And then they did it.
And then they just, it's the best example I can get. Now, I'm not an argument. There's very few things in China I agree with at this point, so that's a different story. But the idea of having a public dialogue, we get ridiculed. 20 years ago when there was the Suttertown News, and I wrote for it, people in Sacramento ridicule us all the time for the Davis spanking machine, but then when they see the results of the finished product 10 or 15 years later, they emulate or aspire to that. We had parks and bikeways.
I know we get criticized, and there's a lot of snarkiness about it, but I guess my question is, what do we really want? I don't mean we in Davis, we as a society. Do we want an engaged, informed citizenry involved in decision making? Or do we really want, a small group of oligarchs or autocrats to make those decisions? Well, that's not a trick question. But the point is, if you really do want an engaged citizenry, I'm sorry, it's going to be messy. It's going to take more time. If our criteria is efficiency, go with a totalitarian regime. They'll make very efficient decisions. And you know what? I think a lot of times we think, oh man, I wish it was more efficient. I think so too. But what we want is we want engagement of all sectors of our community speaking in, and that will not be efficient. That will not be efficient. But what it will lead to is a community that has broad ownership, where people feel empowered to speak out about their disagreements, knowing that they're not always going to get what they want. Hell, I prefer that. I prefer that anytime. And that's what I want to continue to enhance. I get frustrated with it too. So I'm the president of a housing cooperative. We have the same basic rules as a commission, Brown Act type rules, where you can't meet on the side and then come in and say the decisions are already made. So essentially what we're left with is all decisions related to our co-op are made in that public space. Is that efficient? No. Because it takes a lot longer. Part of it is we have to learn what each other's opinions are.
I'm sorry, but longer than compared to what?
Well, that's a good point, John.
If somebody makes a decision and 3 people complain about it, then the 4th person is hurt, and all 4 of them would have talked about it and none of that bad stuff would have happened, that's not an efficient decision.
It's not. But I think that we can get caught up in believing that is actually more efficient. My point is that
absolutely.
Let people from outside of our community scorn us. Yes, there can be excesses to anything, but I'm actually really happy to run for office in a city where I know I'll have a level of engagement, where I know that if I make a mistake, someone's going to call me on it, where I know it's not just calling me on my mistake, but offering alternative. That's what I want.
Hopefully.
Well, my experience is that if you're willing to put yourself out there, and I am, to say, correct me when I'm wrong. And I'll say that to people watching this, you know, correct me when I'm wrong. I will not be defensive about it. Provide me with an alternative. Help me understand how we can do it better.
You'll work at not being defensive about it. You sounded defensive when you said you weren't going to be defensive, so.
It's a hard thing, you know. You grow thick skin over many, many years.
No, it doesn't work. Thick skin. I mean, the point is, you still. I mean, I want somebody up there with a heart. I don't want somebody up there with a thick skin. I want somebody that, you know, Bill Clinton's best line was, "I feel your pain."
Yeah.
At that point, he was emulating the person that was articulating a much more destitute position.
It's a good point. I mean, and my good friend David Bro, who stands on the corner listening comments about compassion, he's right. I mean, but I guess what I'm saying, yeah, I don't want to be defensive about it. I will be at times, but I also try to listen.
You want to listen. You want to hear the criticism.
Yep.
You're only going to improve and be more effective.
Right.
One of my favorite stories in American history is right after George Washington was reelected, Jefferson resigned as Secretary of State. Jefferson was starting the Federalists. He was beginning to prepare to run against Adams for the next presidential election. Washington said, "You represent a third of the people in the country. If you leave, they won't be at my table for the cabinet meeting." You've got to have the difference of opinion. That's where the efficiency of democracy is.
Yes.
That's where the power of the consensus.
No, I really appreciate that, John, and I think you're right. And you know, bringing it back to the question of conflict within the council, which you know the city experienced some what I would consider to be not healthy conflict.
Yes.
I'm not averse to engaging in conflict with other council members, but there's a way to do it, and I think. One of the things that I really want to try to live faithfully in is to engage in healthy conflict that where I never personalize the issue, where I never pretend like I know the motivations of other people on council, and where I state what I believe we need and what my disagreement is. To a large extent, I think this current council engages in conflict productively. Not a personal issue. Stating what I need to move forward, stating where my disagreements with you are. I want to continue that because I believe that conflict really is that, you know, that concept of iron sharpening iron. Conflict is, you know, is really a seed for growth. It's a seed for making us a stronger community. We don't flee it. We don't stuff it down. We don't pretend like it doesn't exist. We don't just play nice. This is not about kumbaya. This is about engaging in conflict in a way that we're clear about what our differences are and try to discern why they're different and then find a way forward through the conflict to make a decision. People all over the world are figuring this out. People in many communities where there's much deeper conflict and here know how to do it and have processes to do it. And I think that that's something that we need to continue to work on as a community. And I think our city council can be a leader in modeling that type of behavior. I'm really committed to that.
In 2006, my friend Jack Kenward said that he wanted Robb Davis to run for city council. I haven't found any reason to disagree with Jack Kenward in the last 7 years, so I think that if you're elected, I think you'll do a good job,
Thanks,
and I thank you for running.
Thanks.
So
I just have one request.
Go ahead.
Let me come back and dig into some of the economic health issues and maybe a little bit more on some of the environmental issues that I care passionately about. I think I babbled on about a lot of stuff, but there's a lot more stuff to talk about. And I also want to make sure that people who are watching understand that I'm really committed to, I'm in a listening and learning process, and please contact me. The website that I think has been up periodically throughout the show, I'm not sure, you know, there's an email address on there, use it. My phone number's on there, use it. And I'd be willing to sit down with people at any time as part of this apprenticeship of preparing to serve the city.
This is what's going on. Thanks for watching.